The aroma of Japanese spices filled the Tanaka family dining room. Lauren, with her long black hair and almond-shaped eyes, nervously adjusted the sleeve of her modern kimono as she watched her mother, Akiko, meticulously set the table with china inherited from generations. Lauren's father, Hiroshi, a man of few words and many principles, flipped distractedly through the newspaper, seemingly oblivious to the tension in the air. Lauren's grandmother, Obaya-chan, was slowly stirring a spoon in her cup of green tea, her wrinkled eyes fixed on Lauren with a mixture of curiosity and concern. She had always been the most perceptive of the family, able to read the emotions of her loved ones as if they were kanji characters on a page. "Lauren, darling," Akiko called out from the kitchen, her voice soft but laden with anticipation. "You said you had some important news to share with us today. Your father and I are looking forward to hearing it." Lauren took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the engagement ring on her finger. She glanced at the door, eagerly awaiting Dylan's arrival. Her heart raced as she heard the doorbell ring. "I'll get it," Lauren said, getting up quickly. She opened the door, revealing Dylan Johnson, tall, dark-skinned, and kind-eyed. He smiled nervously, adjusting the tie that Lauren had insisted he wear for the occasion. "Is everything all right?" Dylan whispered, taking Lauren's hand. She nodded, trying to convey confidence even though her stomach was in knots. They entered the dining room where the Tanaka family were waiting for them. Hiroshi lowered the newspaper, his eyes narrowing slightly at the sight of Dylan. Akiko, ever the gracious hostess, stood up to greet them. "Dylan, how nice to see you again," she said, her voice controlled but not entirely warm. "Please, sit down. Dinner is almost ready." Lauren and Dylan sat side by side, their hands intertwined under the table. The silence that followed was broken only by the clink of cutlery and the occasional sip of tea from Oba-chan. Finally, Lauren gathered her courage. "Mom, Dad, Oba-chan," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "Dylan and I have something important to tell you." Hiroshi put down his hashis, his intense gaze fixed on his daughter. Akiko stopped serving the rice, her spoon hanging in the air. Lauren hesitated, looking at Dylan for support. He squeezed her hand gently, encouraging her. "We're engaged. Dylan asked me to marry him, and I said yes." The silence that followed was deafening. Lauren could hear her own heart beating furiously in her ears. She watched her family's expressions change: surprise, shock, and then something that made her heart sink: disapproval. Hiroshi was the first to react. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the wooden floor. Without saying a word, he left the room, leaving a vacuum of tension in his wake. Akiko, ever the diplomat, tried to keep her composure, although her hands were visibly shaking. "Lauren, dear," she began, her voice forlornly calm, "this is unexpected. Perhaps we should discuss it another time, when your father is more prepared." Dylan, sensing the growing hostility, tried to intervene. "Mr. and Mrs. Tanaka, I understand that this may come as a shock, but I love your daughter deeply. I promise to take care of her and respect her, just as I respect your family's culture and traditions." His words, although sincere, seemed to fall on deaf ears. Akiko only nodded stiffly, avoiding looking directly at Dylan. Lauren, feeling tears forming in her eyes, looked imploringly at her grandmother. The Oba-chan had always been her safe haven, the voice of reason and compassion in the family, but even she seemed lost, her eyes reflecting a mixture of sadness and confusion. "Oba-chan," Lauren whispered, "please say something." The old woman sighed deeply, placing her teacup on the table with trembling hands. Lauren, my dear," she began, her voice tired, "the path you have chosen will not be easy. Our family, our community, There are expectations, traditions. Stir, but shouldn't love overcome all that? Lauren argued, her voice laced with emotion. Dylan is a wonderful, talented, kind man. Why should the color of his skin matter more than the content of his character? Akiko intervened, her voice tense. It's not just about color, Lauren. It's about culture, about preserving our heritage. How do you expect your children to understand who they are, where they came from? Dylan, feeling the need to defend his love, spoke again. Mrs. Tanaka, I deeply respect Japanese culture. I promise that our children will know and value both sides of their heritage. But his words only seemed to intensify the tension. Akiko stood up abruptly. I think it's best if we end this conversation for today. Lauren, think carefully about what you're doing. There's a lot at stake here. Lauren felt as if the ground was disappearing beneath her feet. She looked at Dylan, seeing the pain and determination in his eyes. In that moment, she knew that no matter what happened, they would face it together. As they prepared to leave, the Obaya-chan approached Lauren, taking her hands in hers. The heart chooses its own paths, my dear, she whispered. But remember, the bridges you burn today may be the same ones you'll need to cross tomorrow. Lauren and Dylan walked out of the Tanaka house, hand in hand, leaving behind a heavy silence and divided hearts. As they walked through the cool night, Lauren looked up at the stars, remembering an old Japanese legend about lovers separated by the Milky Way. We'll get through this, Dylan said softly, squeezing her hand. Our love is stronger than any prejudice. Lauren nodded, swallowing the knot in her throat. She knew that the road ahead would be difficult, but she also knew that the love they shared was true and valuable. As they drove away from her childhood home, Lauren made a silent promise to herself. One day she would reconcile the two worlds she loved, no matter how long it took. The distant sound of a melody floated through the air, coming from a lone violin somewhere in the neighborhood. Lauren smiled through her tears, remembering how Dylan's music always comforted her. Perhaps, she thought, music would be the language that would finally unite their families, transcending cultural barriers and prejudices. With this hope in their hearts, Lauren and Dylan walked towards their uncertain but full of possibilities future, leaving behind the echo of shattered dreams and the promise of new beginnings. The morning sun filtered through the curtains of the small apartment, illuminating Lauren Tanaka's serene face. She opened her eyes slowly, feeling Dylan Johnson's arm around her waist. For a moment, she allowed herself to smile, remembering the day before, their intimate, love-filled wedding. The ceremony had been simple but deeply meaningful. Held in a city park with only a handful of close friends as witnesses, Lauren and Dylan exchanged vows under an arch of cherry blossoms. The absence of the Tanaka family was painfully noticeable, but the couple were determined not to let it overshadow their happiness. Lauren turned to look at Dylan, who was still sleeping peacefully. Her fingers gently traced the lines of his face, marveling at the beauty and strength she saw there. "Let's face the world together," she whispered, reaffirming the promise they had made the day before. The soft sound of guitar strings filled the room, making Lauren smile. Dylan, even in his sleep, seemed to be composing. His connection with music was something she had always admired, a passion that had united them since they first met. As Lauren quietly got up to prepare breakfast, her hands brushed against an envelope on the bedside table. It was a letter from her Obaya-chan, delivered discreetly by a cousin on their wedding day. Her heart racing, Lauren opened the envelope and began to read. "My dear Lauren, true love is rare and precious. Don't let the fear of others dim your light. Always remember who you are and where you came from, but don't be afraid to create your own path. I'll always be here, even if in silence for now. Be happy, my granddaughter." With all my love, Oba-chan's silent tears streamed down Lauren's face as she put the letter away, feeling a mixture of gratitude and sadness. Her grandmother's silent support was a thread of hope that she clung to. In the kitchen, Lauren began to prepare a breakfast that blended their heritages: fried rice with eggs and bacon, accompanied by green tea. The aroma attracted Dylan, who entered the kitchen rubbing his sleepy eyes. "Good morning, Mrs. Johnson," he smiled, hugging her from behind and kissing her neck. Lauren laughed softly. "Good morning, Mr. Johnson. Ready for our first day as an officially married couple?" Dylan spun Lauren around in his arms, looking deeply into her eyes. "Always ready, as long as I'm with you." As they ate, they discussed their plans for the future. Dylan talked about a new composition he was working on, inspired by his journey of love. Lauren shared her ideas for advancing her career as a graphic designer. "You know," Dylan said, taking Lauren's hand across the table, "I thought of a melody last night. It's about us, about overcoming obstacles. Do you want to hear it?" Lauren nodded enthusiastically, watching Dylan pick up his guitar. The first notes filled the apartment, a bittersweet melody that spoke of challenges and triumphs, of love that transcends barriers. Lauren felt her heart fill with emotion, recognizing her story in the notes Dylan played. When the song ended, they both had tears in their eyes. "It's beautiful, Dylan," Lauren whispered. "It's us." Dylan smiled, putting the guitar aside. "I'm going to call it Bridges Over Troubled Waters, because that's what we are, Lauren. We're building bridges, even when others try to put up walls." Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Lauren and Dylan established a comfortable routine, supporting each other in their careers and dreams. Dylan continued to write, his music gradually gaining recognition on the local scene. Lauren, meanwhile, began to make a name for herself in the world of design, her creativity flourishing under the constant support of her husband. However, the absence of the Tanaka family hung like a shadow over her happiness. Lauren tried several times to make contact, sending letters and photos, but rarely received a reply. The few replies that did arrive were brief and formal, mainly from her mother. One fall afternoon, almost 2 years after the wedding, Lauren received an unexpected call. It was her mother, Akiko, her voice tense and hesitant on the other end of the line. "Lauren," she said, we'd like to see you, if you want to." Lauren's heart raced. "Of course, Mom. I'd love to. Can Dylan come too?" There was a long, heavy pause before Akiko answered. Maybe it's better just you this time, sweetheart." Lauren closed her eyes, feeling a mixture of hope and disappointment. "I see," she said softly. "When should I go?" They arranged lunch for the following weekend. When Lauren hung up the phone, she found Dylan looking at her with a mixture of concern and love. "Is everything all right?" he asked, enveloping her in a hug. Lauren buried her face in Dylan's chest, inhaling his comforting scent. "They want to see me," she murmured. "But just me." Dylan sighed, stroking Lauren's hair. "It's okay, love. It's a start. Go, reconnect with your family. I'll be here waiting for you." On the day of lunch, Lauren found herself standing in front of the door of her old house, her heart beating furiously. Before she could knock, the door opened, revealing the wrinkled, gentle face of her Oba-chan. "Okaeri, Lauren," her grandmother said softly, using the traditional Japanese greeting for "welcome back." Lauren felt tears welling up in her eyes as she hugged her grandmother. "Tadaima, Oba-chan," she replied. "I'm home." As she walked into the house, Lauren knew that this was just the first step in a long journey of reconciliation. But with Dylan's love as her foundation and the melody of hope in her heart, she felt ready to face whatever lay ahead. Outside, the autumn leaves danced in the wind, like notes from an unwritten song, promising new beginnings and the possibility of bridges being rebuilt over long troubled waters. The summer sun bathed the Johnsons' small garden in golden light. Lauren, now 35, watched with a smile on her lips as Dylan, 37, played with his children. Kai, a 10-year-old boy with cafe au lait skin and almond-shaped eyes, ran around in circles, laughing as his father tried to catch him. Hannah, a 6-year-old girl with dark curls and bright eyes, clapped her hands and shouted for joy. Lauren felt her heart fill with love and gratitude. Despite the challenges they had faced, she and Dylan had built a beautiful life together. The music of laughter and joy that echoed through the garden was living proof of this. "Mommy, look!" Kai shouted, running towards Lauren. "I've composed a new song on the piano. Do you want to hear it?" Lauren smiled, running her hand through her son's hair. "Of course, my love. I can't wait to hear it." Kai ran into the house, eager to show off his new creation. Dylan approached, carrying Hannah on his shoulders. "He's got his musical talent," Lauren said softly to Dylan. Dylan smiled, his eyes shining with pride. "And his mother's creativity. You Tanakas are full of surprises." The mention of her family's surname brought a pang of sadness to Lauren's heart. Although things had improved slightly after that lunch years ago, the relationship with her parents was still strained and distant. They rarely saw their grandchildren, and when they did, it was always with a mixture of reluctant love and ill-concealed discomfort. The sound of the piano interrupted her thoughts. Kai began to play, his small hands dancing over the keys with surprising skill for his age. The melody was sweet and melancholy, reminding Lauren of the song Dylan had composed at the beginning of their marriage. "It's beautiful, Kai," Lauren said with emotion when the song ended. "Dad helped me a bit," Kai admitted, blushing with pride. Dylan ruffled his son's hair affectionately. "Just a little. The talent is all yours, champ." Hannah, not wanting to be left out, tugged on Lauren's skirt. "Mom, I want to show you something too. Look at my new dance." Lauren watched in delight as Hannah twirled around the garden, her movements graceful even in their childish exuberance. "Will Grandma and Grandpa like to see this?" Hannah asked innocently as she finished her dance. Lauren's smile faltered for a moment. "I'm sure they will, darling," she replied, exchanging a meaningful glance with Dylan. Later that night, after the children had gone to bed, Lauren and Dylan sat on the balcony, enjoying the evening breeze. "They're growing up so fast," Lauren sighed, leaning back against Dylan's chest. Dylan nodded, wrapping his arms around her. "And they're amazing, smart, talented, compassionate. We're doing a good job, Lauren." Lauren smiled, but there was a shadow in her eyes. I wish my parents could see it. Really see it." Dylan kissed the top of her head softly. "They will, eventually. We can't force them, but we can keep showing them the love and beauty we've created together." Lauren nodded, remembering her Obaya-chan's words years ago. "Building bridges," she murmured. The next day, Lauren was at work, immersed in a new design project, when her boss, Mr. Yamamoto, walked into her office. "Lauren, I need to talk to you about the new client," he said, his tone serious. Lauren felt a knot forming in her stomach. Mr. Yamamoto was known for his conservatism and sometimes subtly prejudiced comments. "Of course, Mr. Yamamoto. What can I do for you?" The older man hesitated for a moment before continuing. "The client is quite traditional. He expressed concern about having a diverse team working on his project." Lauren felt her face heat up. "Are you suggesting that I shouldn't be part of the team, Mr. Yamamoto?" He had the decency to look uncomfortable. "I'm not suggesting anything, Lauren. I'm just sharing the client's concerns." Lauren took a deep breath, struggling to keep her composure. "Mr. Yamamoto, with all due respect, my work speaks for itself. If the client has concerns about diversity, perhaps this is an opportunity to educate them about the benefits of different perspectives on a project." Mr. Yamamoto looked at her for a long moment before nodding slowly. "You're right, Lauren. I'll talk to the client again. Keep up the excellent work." As he left, Lauren let out a shaky sigh. Situations like this still took her by surprise, reminding her of the barriers she and her family faced on a daily basis. That evening, while helping Kai with his history homework, Lauren was surprised by a question. "Mom, why don't some people like families like ours?" Lauren felt her heart squeeze. "Oh, Kai," she said softly, pulling him close. "Some people are afraid of what's different. They don't understand that love is what really matters in a family." Kai thought for a moment. "But we're not different. We're just us." Lauren smiled, tears shining in her eyes. "Exactly, my love. And that's what makes our family so special." Later, lying in bed next to Dylan, Lauren shared the day's events. "Sometimes I wonder if we're doing the right thing," she whispered into the darkness, "exposing our children to this kind of prejudice." Dylan turned to her, his face serious in the moonlight. "Lauren, what we're doing is important. We're showing Kai and Hana that love overcomes barriers. That diversity is a strength, not a weakness." Lauren nodded, feeling reassured by her husband's words. "You're right, it's just, sometimes it's exhausting, always having to prove yourself." Dylan pulled her closer. "I know, my love, but every day we live with love and dignity is a victory. We're changing the world, one heart at a time." As Lauren fell asleep in Dylan's arms, she thought about her children, her parents, all the bridges that still needed to be built. But she also thought of Kai's music, Hana's dancing, Dylan's unwavering love. And she knew deep in her heart that they were on the right track. Outside, a gentle breeze swayed the leaves of the trees, creating a soft melody that seemed to echo Dylan's words, changing the world, one heart at a time. The shrill ring of the telephone cut through the silence of the night, rousing Lauren from a restless sleep. She groped around in the dark, her heart racing as she saw the familiar number on the screen. "Hello?" she answered, her voice shaky. "Lauren!" The voice of her mother, Akiko, sounded fragile and frightened. "It's your father. He's had a heart attack. We're in hospital." Lauren's world seemed to freeze. "I'm on my way," she whispered, hanging up the phone. Dylan, already awake, wrapped his arms around her. "What happened?" "My dad," Lauren said, tears starting to fall. "He's in hospital. I need to go." "We're going," Dylan corrected softly. "I'll go with you." Lauren hesitated. "Dylan, I don't know if—" "Lauren," he interrupted gently. "We're a family. We face this together." As they hurriedly got dressed, Lauren called her neighbor, asking her to take care of Kai and Hana. The drive to the hospital was a blur of city lights and anguished thoughts. At the hospital, Lauren and Dylan found Akiko in the waiting room, looking small and frail in a plastic chair. When she saw her daughter, Akiko stood up, hesitating for a moment before hugging her. "Oh, Lauren," she sobbed. "I was so scared." Lauren returned the hug, feeling years of tension dissolve momentarily. When they separated, Akiko looked at Dylan, a mixture of surprise and something that could be gratitude in her eyes. "Dylan," she said softly, "thank you for coming." Dylan nodded respectfully. "How is he, Mrs. Tanaka?" Akiko sighed, the exhaustion evident on her face. "Stable, for now. The doctors say the next 24 hours will be critical." As they waited for news, Lauren observed her mother and her husband, sitting side by side in the waiting room. It was a sight she had never imagined she would see, and despite the circumstances, she felt a twinge of hope. The hours dragged by. Dylan went out to get coffee for everyone, returning with steaming cups and a bag of sweet rolls that he knew Lauren loved. "Thank you," Akiko said softly, accepting the coffee. She hesitated for a moment before adding, "You're very thoughtful." Dylan smiled gently. "It's the least I can do." As the morning progressed, Lauren noticed her mother watching Dylan with growing curiosity. When he offered to fetch blankets for them, Akiko turned to Lauren. "He's a good man," she said softly. I should have seen this before." Lauren felt tears forming in her eyes. "Yes, he is, Mom. He always has been." Finally, a doctor appeared, bringing news that Hiroshi was awake and stable. "He's asking to see his family," the doctor informed them. Lauren and Akiko stood up immediately, but when Dylan made a point of following them, Lauren hesitated. Maybe I should go first," she said softly. Dylan nodded understandingly. "Of course, love. I'll be here if you need me." In the hospital room, Lauren found her father looking frail and small in bed, tubes and monitors all around him. His eyes opened as she entered, a faint smile forming on his lips. "Lauren," he whispered, "my daughter." Lauren ran to the side of the bed, taking her father's hand. "Dad, I'm here. It's going to be okay." Hiroshi squeezed her hand weakly. "Lauren, I'm so sorry for everything." Lauren felt tears run down her face. "Dad, no, don't worry about it now." But Hiroshi shook his head stubbornly. "No, I have to say it. I've been foolish, proud. I've wasted so many years." "Shh," Lauren soothed him. "We have time to make things right. You'll be fine." Hiroshi looked at her with tired but determined eyes. "Dylan, he came with you?" Lauren nodded in surprise. "Yes, he's outside." "Bring him here," Hiroshi said. "Please." Lauren hesitated for a moment before going out to call Dylan. When they returned together, Hiroshi watched them with an expression that mixed regret and something that looked like admiration. "Dylan," he said weakly, "thank you for looking after my daughter, my family." Dylan approached the bed, his voice gentle. "Mr. Tanaka, there's nothing I wouldn't do for Lauren and our children. They are my world." Hiroshi nodded slowly. "I see that now. I was blind for a long time." Lauren watched in amazement as her father and husband talked quietly. It was as if an invisible wall was finally crumbling. Over the next few days, as Hiroshi slowly recovered, a subtle transformation began to take place. Akiko spent hours talking to Dylan about music and cooking. Hiroshi asked to see photos of Kai and Hana, his eyes filling with tears at the sight of the grandchildren he barely knew. A week later, when Hiroshi was discharged, it was Dylan who helped him into the car, with a kindness and respect that didn't go unnoticed by anyone. At home, Lauren watched through the window as Dylan played in the garden with Kai and Hana. Akiko joined her, a thoughtful look on her face. "They're beautiful," Akiko said softly. "Our grandchildren." Lauren felt her heart expand. "Yes, they are. Would you like to get to know them better?" Akiko nodded, tears shining in her eyes. More than anything. That evening, as the family gathered for dinner, the Tanakas and the Johnsons together for the first time, Lauren felt a wave of gratitude and hope. The bridges that seemed to have been burned so long ago were being rebuilt, slowly but surely. As she watched her father laughing at a Kai joke, her mother teaching Hana how to use hashis, and Dylan smiling at her from across the table, Lauren knew that, no matter how turbulent the waters might be, love had the power to build the strongest bridges of all. The afternoon sun filtered through the curtains of the hospital room, casting a golden glow over Hiroshi Tanaka's tired face. Lauren watched her father with a mixture of concern and hope, noticing how the days of recovery had softened the lines of tension on his face. "Dad," she said softly, adjusting his pillow, "Dylan's here. He brought something special for you." Hiroshi opened his eyes slowly, a flash of curiosity passing through his gaze. "Dylan?" As if summoned, Dylan entered the room carrying his guitar. He smiled gently at Hiroshi, inclining his head in a respectful gesture. "Mr. Tanaka," Dylan greeted, "I hope you're feeling better today." Hiroshi nodded, his eyes fixed on the instrument. "Are you going to play for me?" he asked, his voice a mixture of surprise and anticipation. Dylan smiled, pulling a chair close to the bed. "If you'll allow me, I'd like to share a song I've composed. It's about our family." Lauren felt her heart race. She knew how much this song meant to Dylan, how much he had worked on it over the last few weeks, trying to capture his family's complex journey in melody and lyrics. As the first chords filled the room, Lauren saw her father close his eyes, his face relaxing. The melody was soft and melancholy at first, evoking the challenges and pain of separation. Gradually, it transformed into something more hopeful, the notes rising in a promise of reconciliation. Dylan began to sing, his voice rich and emotional. "Bridges over troubled waters, built with love and forgiveness, uniting distant hearts in a new song." Lauren watched in amazement as silent tears began to run down her father's face. Akiko, who had quietly entered the room, held her husband's hand, her own eyes shining with emotion. When the music ended, a reverent silence hung in the room. Hiroshi opened his eyes, looking directly at Dylan with an intensity that made Lauren hold her breath. "Is that," Hiroshi said, his voice breaking, "how you feel about our family?" Dylan nodded, putting the guitar aside. "Yes, Mr. Tanaka. Every note, every word. It's what I feel for Lauren, for our children, and for the family I hope we can be together." Hiroshi held out his trembling hand, which Dylan took without hesitation. "I was a fool," Hiroshi said softly. "An old fool blinded by prejudice and fear. May I ask your forgiveness?" "Oh," Lauren felt the tears run down her own face, watching this moment of vulnerability and connection between her father and her husband. Dylan gently squeezed Hiroshi's hand. "There's nothing to forgive, Mr. Tanaka," he replied. "What matters is the future we can build together." Akiko, who had remained silent, finally spoke. "The music," she said, her voice trembling, "reminded me of an old Japanese legend about the Tanabata festival, where lovers separated by the Milky Way can meet once a year." Lauren smiled through her tears. "I remember that story, Mom. You used to tell it to me when I was little." "Maybe," Hiroshi said slowly, "we don't have to wait a whole year to get together. Maybe we can start now." At that moment, as if the universe was responding to Hiroshi's wish, the bedroom door opened, revealing Kai and Hana, accompanied by Obaa-chan. The children hesitated for a moment, their eyes wide at the sight of their grandfather in the hospital bed. "Grandpa," Kai called out shyly. Hiroshi straightened up in bed, his eyes lighting up at the sight of his grandchildren. "Come here, children," he said softly, holding out his arms. Kai and Hana ran to the bed, hugging their grandfather gently but enthusiastically. Lauren watched with emotion as her father hugged his grandchildren for the first time, tears streaming freely down her face. "Grandpa," Hana said, her little voice full of concern, "are you going to get well soon? I want to show you my new dance." Hiroshi laughed softly, a sound Lauren realized she hadn't heard in years. "Yes, my little flower," I'll be well soon, and I can't wait to see your dance. Kai, ever the musician in training, looked at Dylan's guitar. Daddy, can we play that song we were practicing? The one with the parts in Japanese? Dylan looked at Lauren, who nodded encouragingly. Sure, champ. How about we show Grandpa and Grandma what we've been learning? As Dylan and Kai prepared to play, Lauren felt her Obaya-chan's arm around her. The old lady smiled knowingly. You see, my dear, she whispered, the bridges that looked burnt are being rebuilt. Love has that power. Lauren nodded, feeling a wave of gratitude and hope. As the music filled the room again, this time with Kai's sweet voice joining Dylan's, she watched her family gather, Hiroshi and Akiko holding hands, listening intently. Hana, swaying to the rhythm of the music. The Obaa-chan, her eyes shining with joy. At that moment, Lauren knew that, no matter how difficult the road ahead, they would walk it together. The music Dylan had composed wasn't just a song, it was a promise, a new beginning. As the last notes echoed in the room, Lauren felt that they were finally all tuned into the same melody, a symphony of love, forgiveness, and hope. The scent of Japanese spices mingled with the comforting smell of freshly baked apple pie, filling the Tanaka home with a fragrance that symbolized the fusion of two cultures. Lauren watched with a full heart as her mother, Akiko, and Dylan worked side by side in the kitchen, preparing a dinner that celebrated both the family's Japanese and American heritage. Hiroshi, now recovered and sitting comfortably in the living room, was leafing through a photo album with Kai and Hana. His eyes shone with a mixture of joy and regret as he saw the images of moments he had missed. Grandpa, Kai said, pointing to a photo, that was my first piano performance. I was so nervous. Hiroshi smiled gently, running his hand through his grandson's hair. You must have been wonderful, Kai. I wish I could have been there. Lauren felt a lump in her throat when she heard those words. She moved closer, taking a seat next to her father. There are still many performances ahead, Dad. You'll be there for all of them now. Hiroshi nodded, his eyes meeting his daughter's with a mixture of gratitude and determination. Yes, I will be, I promise you. In the kitchen, Dylan and Akiko chatted animatedly as they prepared the dishes. Lauren watched in amazement as her mother laughed at Dylan's joke, a sound she hadn't heard in years. You know, Dylan, Akiko said, as she carefully shaped an onigiri. I never thought I'd say this, but you make better tempura than I do. Dylan blushed, a shy smile on his face. I learned from the best, Mrs. Tanaka. Your recipes are a treasure. Akiko paused, looking at Dylan with a soft expression. Please call me Akiko. After all, we are family. The moment was interrupted by Hana, who rushed into the kitchen, her eyes shining with excitement. Mom! Daddy! Grandpa wants to show us something in the garden. Intrigued, everyone followed Hana into the Tanaka backyard. There, to Lauren's surprise, they found Hiroshi standing next to a small makeshift stage, decorated with lights and flowers. What's this, Dad? Lauren asked, thrilled. Hiroshi smiled, a mischievous twinkle in his eyes that Lauren hadn't seen since childhood. I thought we could have a little family concert. After all, we have a lot of time to make up. Dylan looked at Lauren, a broad smile on his face. What do you think, love? Should we show Grandpa what the Johnson-Tanaka family can do? Lauren nodded, feeling a wave of emotion wash over her. Absolutely. As Dylan picked up his guitar and Kai positioned himself next to the small keyboard Hiroshi had provided, Lauren noticed her Obaa-chan quietly joining the group, a wise smile on her wrinkled face. The music began softly, with Dylan strumming the strings of his guitar in a melody that Lauren recognized immediately, the song he had composed about his family. Kai joined in, his small hands dancing over the keyboard keys with surprising skill for his age. Then, to everyone's amazement, Hiroshi stepped forward and began to sing. His voice, although a little hoarse from disuse, carried an emotion that made Lauren's eyes fill with tears. Bridges over troubled waters, built with love and forgiveness, uniting distant hearts in a new song. Lauren joined her father, their voices blending in a harmony that spoke of years of pain, but also of hope and reconciliation. Akiko, with tears in her eyes, hugged Hana, who swayed to the rhythm of the song. When the song ended, there was a moment of reverent silence, broken only by the distant sound of crickets in the garden. Then, slowly, applause broke out, led by Obaya-chan, whose eyes shone with pride and joy. Hiroshi turned to Dylan, holding out his hand. "Thank you," he said simply, his voice laced with emotion. "For this music, for this family, for not giving up on us." Dylan squeezed Hiroshi's hand, pulling him into a hug that surprised everyone. "We're a family," he replied, "all of us." Lauren watched, her heart overflowing with love, as her father and husband embraced, years of tension and misunderstandings dissolving in that simple gesture. Akiko approached Lauren, taking her hand. "My child," she said softly, "forgive us for taking so long to see the beauty of what you and Dylan have built." Lauren hugged her mother, feeling as if an enormous weight had been lifted from her shoulders. "There's nothing to forgive, Mom. We're here now, together. That's what matters." The evening continued with more music, laughter, and shared stories. Kai showed his grandfather his original compositions, while Hana charmed everyone with her graceful dancing. The Obaa-chan told stories from the past, weaving a tapestry of memories that connected the generations. As the moon rose in the sky, bathing the garden in its silvery light, Lauren found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. The turbulent waters that had once separated them now seemed calm and serene, the bridges that had been built stronger than ever. Looking at her family together, Dylan laughing with Hiroshi, Akiko teaching Hana how to make origami, Kai playing a soft melody on the piano, Lauren felt a deep sense of gratitude and hope. The symphony of their lives, once discordant and fragmented, now sounded in perfect harmony, and Lauren knew, with a certainty that came from the depths of her soul, that this was only the beginning of a new and beautiful composition. The rising sun painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, heralding the start of a new day. Lauren Johnson Tanaka watched through the kitchen window, a steaming cup of green tea in her hands, as the aroma of freshly made pancakes filled the air. It was a special day, her Obaya-chan's 80th birthday. Behind her, Dylan was preparing breakfast, softly humming a melody that Lauren recognized as the song he had composed for the family years ago. The familiar sound warmed her heart, reminding her of how far they had come. "Mommy! Daddy!" The excited voice of Hana, now 16, echoed through the house. "Grandpa and Grandma are here." Lauren smiled, placing her cup on the counter. She still marveled at how easily these words came out of her daughter's mouth, remembering a time not so long ago when it seemed impossible for her parents to be part of her life again. Hiroshi and Akiko Tanaka entered the kitchen, their faces lit up with warm smiles. Hiroshi was carrying a large arrangement of cherry blossoms, while Akiko was carrying a box that Lauren knew contained Obaa-chan's favorite kimono. "Good morning, dears," Akiko said, hugging Lauren and then Dylan. "Do you need help with anything?" Dylan smiled, handing Akiko a bowl of pancake batter. "Actually, your secret recipe for matcha pancakes would be perfect for today." Hiroshi approached Lauren, his eyes shining with a mixture of love and regret that never seemed to disappear completely. How are you feeling, child? Today is a great day." Lauren nodded, feeling a wave of emotion wash over her. "It is, Dad. I'm glad we can all be here together to celebrate." The sound of piano notes floated through the house, announcing that Kai, now a young man in his 20s, had woken up and started his morning practice. The melody was new, an original composition he was preparing, especially for his great-grandmother's celebration. As the family moved around the kitchen, preparing breakfast and the last details for the party, Lauren couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought them here. The wounds of the past, although healed, were sometimes still felt in quiet moments. But love, music, and the determination to stay together had proved stronger than any hurt. The sound of the doorbell interrupted his thoughts. "I'll get it," Hana shouted, running to the door. Moments later, Oba-chan's soft, melodious voice filled the house. "Ohayu gozaimasu, my dear family." Everyone gathered in the living room where the Oba-chan, still elegant and graceful at 80, was smiling radiantly. She wore a simple but beautiful kimono, which Lauren recognized as the same one she wore on the day Lauren and Dylan announced their engagement so many years ago. "Oba-chan," Lauren said, hugging her grandmother gently. "Happy birthday. We're so happy to have you here with us." The old lady smiled, her eyes shining with wisdom and love. "The real present, my dear, is seeing this family united and happy. That's all I've ever wanted." As everyone settled down for breakfast, Lauren noticed how full the table was, not just of food, but of love, laughter, and lively conversation. Kai was discussing music with Dylan and Hiroshi, while Hana was showing Akiko and Oba-chan photos of her latest dance recital. After breakfast, everyone gathered in the garden, where a small stage had been set up. It was a tradition that began years ago on that evening of reconciliation, and had since become an essential part of every family gathering. Kai was the first to perform, his hands dancing over the piano keys in a composition that mixed elements of classical Japanese music with contemporary jazz. Lauren noted with a heart full of pride how her son had inherited not only Dylan's musical talent, but also a deep appreciation for his cultural heritage. Next, Hana performed a dance that combined classical ballet with movements inspired by traditional Japanese dance. Her grace and fluidity left everyone breathless, especially Hiroshi, whose eyes shone with emotion at the sight of his granddaughter. Dylan then stood up, guitar in hand. "Oba-chan," he said, his voice full of respect and affection. "This is a song I composed for you. It's called The Wisdom of the Cherry Trees." As Dylan played and sang, Lauren watched her grandmother's face. Silent tears streamed down the Oba-chan's wrinkled cheeks, but her smile was radiant. The song spoke of deep roots, of flowers that bloom even after harsh winters, of beauty that lasts through the generations. When the song ended, there was a moment of reverent silence before the applause erupted. The Oba-chan slowly stood up, gesturing for everyone to come closer. "My beloved family," she began, her voice soft but firm. "I look at each of you and see living proof that love can overcome any obstacle. Lauren, Dylan," she turned to the couple, "you have taught us that true strength lies in unity, not separation. Hiroshi, Akiko," she looked at her son and daughter-in-law, "you showed us that it's never too late to open our hearts. And Kai, Hana," she smiled at her great-grandchildren, "you are the promise of a bright future where differences are celebrated, not feared." Lauren felt Dylan squeeze her hand and looked at him with watery eyes. At that moment, all the struggles, all the tears shed over the years seemed worth it. The Oba-chan continued, her voice laden with emotion. "Life is like a great symphony. Sometimes there are dissonances, notes that don't seem to fit, but with love, patience, and understanding, these notes are transformed into beautiful harmonies. This is our symphony, the symphony of the Johnson-Tanaka family. As the afternoon sun bathed the garden in its golden light, the family gathered in a collective embrace around the Oba-chan. Lauren, at the center of this circle of love, felt a deep sense of peace and gratitude. The bridges that once seemed burnt had not only been rebuilt, but strengthened. The turbulent waters of the past now flowed gently, nourishing the roots of a family tree that grew stronger every day. As the sound of laughter and conversation filled the air, mingling with the soft notes of Kai's piano, Lauren knew that this was only the beginning of a new chapter. The melody of their lives would continue to evolve, with new challenges and joys ahead. But now, united by love and music, they would face the future together as a family. If this story touched your heart, I invite you to like and subscribe to the channel. Your support inspires us to bring new, exciting stories. Support the channel by clicking the link in the first comment or scanning the QR code on your screen. Share this story with someone special and leave a comment about what you'd like to see next. Get ready for the amazing story that is unfolding on your screen right now.